We have been looking at the Semitic paradigm. This happens to be the 10th session. In the last session, we have seen the Christian paradigm, which is derived from the Semitic paradigm. But there are some additional points. But on the whole, we look at the Christian paradigm as a Semitic paradigm only. Just like the Islamic paradigm also is essentially derived from the Semitic paradigm and almost entirely the same paradigm. We compared the two paradigms and noted the commonalities. There were some differences that also we have noted. Now in this session may be a little tedious in the sense that I have about 160 files on the history of Christianity in Europe. We can't cover it in a single session, so we'll split it into two. But even then, it will be very tedious. Today we will cover the first four of these listings: early Christianity, the apostolic throne, the temporal rulers, and crusades. In the next session, we will look at the Dark Age, Inquisition, and Reformation. That would in some way cover all the aspects of history of Christianity in Europe. After that, we will look at the history of Christianity in India, how it manifested. It will be heavy in the sense that I am going to recount so many incidents over a period of something like 2000 years. Difficult to remember, so you can go back to this set of files which will be kept in our website. I wish to state this right at the beginning that don't think that I'm in a fault-finding mission. That is not my purpose. I wish that you start connecting the incidents to the paradigm behind that. Almost all the things that I'm saying here are related to the paradigm manifesting as history, and history from which we need to learn in the sense that we have to be cautious about the paradigm. So we'll begin with early Christianity. It is more 2020 years since the Christian era began. Jesus died around the 30 AD. And following his crucifixion, he died and he was buried. But 3 days later, there was a resurrection. He left the tomb and rose from the tomb. This is called resurrection. And he appeared in his original body in front of his disciples and gave them several commands. One of them is to create a church and go and spread my message across the world. All power is given to me, both in heaven and on earth. Therefore, you are authorized to do this. Go across the world and spread my message. Those who follow my message, accept my leadership, my prophethood, and believe in me, he is also welcome by the Father in the heaven who has sent me. And those who do not believe in me are not accepted by my Father also, and they will be damned. Their eternal damnation awaits them. This is the essential message. So the content, religious content of Christianity, one of the essential religious activity in Christianity is conversion. whatever the means, you need to convert. It essentially sees the whole of humanity as those who are the followers of the belief and those who are against it, who are not with me are against me. That is the viewpoint, that is the approach that the Christianity adopts towards humanity. So in this history in Europe, it is this that is manifesting, and I want you to connect to that. So he appeared before his disciples and asked them to form churches. And the chief church, he said, his chief disciple, or they are called apostles, is identified as Peter. So Jesus is supposed to have said that Peter is the rock upon whom I will build my church. The apostles spread out. Some of them remained in Jerusalem, that is where Jesus was crucified. Some of them went to far and near places. Some went to Alexandria, some went to Antioch, some went to Byzantium, some went to Rome. Among the people who went to Rome, it is said Saint Paul and Saint Peter went to Rome. Rome, by land path, Rome was about 4,000 kilometers from Jerusalem. The path is circuitous, therefore it is quite far. By sea route, it is shorter. But we are talking about 2,000 years ago. But these missionaries, they went to far off places. And they had a mandate to spread their religion, which makes this distinction that either the believer or the non-believer. Non-believer, they call them as heretics. People who are outside the circle of believers. And because of this hard, harsh, clear distinction, they were not welcome in the places they went. Those who went to Rome, especially Saint Paul and Saint Peter, are said to have gone to Rome. They were not welcome there, and there were a lot of difficulties they faced because of this, because Rome was a land of sun worshippers. They would worship the sun. And there were also pagan practices. So Christianity looks at these sun worshippers or pagans with contempt. So naturally, there was a reaction to that, and the Christians who came from outside had to face a lot of problems. They were persecuted. It is said that the first 2.5 centuries, or nearly 3 centuries, you can say, because Saint Paul would have gone there in the year something like 50 AD. And until about 312, 313, they had faced this persecution, but yet they were very, very determined to spread the message of their Lord. The tradition of bishopric, say calling somebody as the bishop or calling somebody as the pope, this was not there initially. In fact, neither Saint Paul nor Peter was called a bishop. It started around something like 70, 76 AD or so. And because of the persecution, it is said that both Saint Paul and Saint Peter were killed. They were martyred. It is also said that the subsequent bishops, some 29 of them, were martyred. At least Christian Church believes that all of them in a row were martyred. They were killed. And they elevated them. It's called canonization. They elevated them to sainthood. They're called Saint somebody. Saint Peter, Saint Paul, etc. This is called canonization, that they are considered to be part of the church till the judgment day. So it is said that 29 out of 31 bishops were martyred and there was a lot of persecution. However, things changed in the 4th century. In the 4th century, Emperor Constantine of Rome, he is considered to be a very good administrator, and he expanded his Roman Empire to far off places. The boundary was very far off from Rome. And Emperor Constantine took a lenient view of Christianity. In fact, it is not enough if you say it is lenient. He favored Christianity, and eventually, at the end of his life, he became a Christian. He did not become a Christian immediately as he started his rule, but he relaxed the norms towards Christians. He encouraged them, he gave them donations. The Lateran Palace where the Pope lives, it's a huge palace in Rome, was a donation from Constantine to Christianity. Until Constantine's time, the Christians or the Pope is a name given to, Pope means Papa. Papa means father. Pope is the word, a generic word used for all bishops. But in later days, it was reserved for the Bishop of Rome. So he allowed the bishop to hold lands and gave donation himself. When you say hold lands, he was not the sovereign, he had to pay the taxes. But normal landowners will have to pay taxes to the government. But Constantine relaxed it and said no taxes. And Constantine also relaxed it, there will be no government scrutiny. In return, the Christianity aligned with the emperor. It was very convenient for them to align with him and called him the supreme pontiff of the church. They accepted him as the pontiff of the church even before he was converted. And he had the authority, several authorities as the pontiff of the church, with the authority to invest bishops, name primates, summon and preside over church councils, resolve dispute over dogma, enforce discipline, deal with the heretics, etc. In fact, he called the Nicaea, Council of Nicaea, to resolve certain dogmatic issues, certain issues on theology in 325. He called the bishops from all over the world at that time, which was around the Asia Minor region. It is said that at that time there were something like 1800 bishops operating on the side of Christianity. Not all of them did come for the meeting. Only about 250 people or so came. He put them in a palace and locked it from outside and said that now you resolve. Until you resolve your disputes, I will not open the gate. So he was the supreme pontiff of the church. The bishop of Rome by this time is the most prominent citizen. He is an advisor to the king, the biggest landowner, private landowner in Rome. He could receive donations, hold and transmit properties. He was exempt from taxation and state scrutiny, and he was allowed to take certain measures against the paganism that was prevalent in and around Rome. Presently, Constantine, he ruled from 312 to 337. Some 25 years, he was a ruler, considered to be a great ruler. He's called the Constantine the Great. His empire was widespread, so he presently decided that he would shift his capital from Rome to Constantinople. Constantinople is a new city, or at least partial city, which he built as the capital of the Roman Empire. The earlier name for Constantinople is Byzantium. The Byzantium became Constantinople because Constantine built that city and he shifted his capital from Rome to Constantinople. It is quite a distance. The distance may be more than 2,000 kilometers. Naturally, Rome, where he was earlier ruling, has become a center which is quite weak. He had a deputy there, but then it was not, the presence of emperor is not there. When this happened, the Pope became the most important citizen of Rome. Since he was in alliance with the emperor and in a very good terms with the emperor, Pope became more and more powerful. Constantine was baptized on his deathbed, 337 AD, the last minutes of his life, he was baptized. The support of the monarchy made Pope the most powerful citizen in the Roman Empire because he had the support of the king. Subsequent emperors continued Christianity, continued in the fold of Christianity, and therefore Rome Pope became very, very prominent. This was around 337 AD. Something like 100 years or little more, the Pope of Rome started asserting his primacy over other bishops. See, now the Bishop of Rome had two agendas. One is that he should be recognized as the most prominent bishop among the bishops of the Universal Church. The Bishop of Rome is one among several, but now he wanted to be identified as the most important bishop of Christianity. And the Pope of Rome is the head of Christian Church. This is one of his agendas, or one of their agendas. Successive popes pursued this agenda. And another is that eventually, by around 6th century AD, that is after the fall of the Roman Empire, in around 476 AD, that is the 5th century, the later part, the Roman Empire was attacked from the north by barbarians. We call them Huns, Lombards. Lombards is the name of the barbarians. They attacked and sacked Italy, occupied many places, and the Roman Empire sitting in Byzantium, that is Constantinople, which is a far off place, could not do much on that. So they lost territories in Italy. There was ups and downs in this. So by the beginning of the 6th century, the Pope started asserting on the side of the Roman Empire against the Lombards and occupied certain states, certain regions, which later came to be known as the Papal States. Until now, he was a landowner, recognized or accepting the sovereignty of the king. But now there are a certain amount of land for which he is the sovereign. So during the 6th century, the popes of Rome became landowners, not only landowners, the sovereign, the rulers of the land. This is known as Papal States. So Pope became an independent ruler. And this land which he acquired at that time remained with papacy, with the church, until the 19th century, 1870. Until then, they held that land. This is known as the temporal power of papacy. Now, Pope is on the way of becoming the most important bishop, and finally he usurped, or the papacy usurped the primacy over Christianity, and at that time his title would be something like this: His Holiness the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, successor to Saint Peter, Prince of Apostles, Primate of Italy, Archbishop and Metropolitan of the Roman province, Sovereign of the state, etc. And also the Vicar of Jesus Christ. Vicar means earthly representative of Jesus. His title is so long, and he acquired this by and by, not in 50, 100 years. See, it started around the 6th century, or actually the planning started in the 4th century itself. But their dream came to be realized by around 1200. That is about 800 years later. And they held this position until about the 19th century. So the Pope, who was a religious head, has also become a temporal head. He was a ruler, a political ruler, as well as a religious primate. Early Christians suffered sporadic persecution because they refused to pay homage to the emperor as divine. Persecution was on the rise in Asia Minor towards the end of the 1st century, as well as in the Rome aftermath, in the aftermath of the Great Fire of Rome in AD 64. During this time, both Saint Paul and Saint Peter died. Saint Peter's presence in Rome, however, has been a matter of controversy since the earliest days. Presently, I am going to show you certain documents and the forgeries that took place. So whether this presence of Saint Peter in Rome is also a part of that strategy of that forgery, or is it real, is still a question mark. The case of 31 canonized bishops is no better. Gibbon has quoted chapter and verse from the earliest records to prove that anti-Christian persecution in Roman Empire had erupted at long intervals and was never very widespread, except at the very end. It was never so persistent as to have engulfed as many as 29 bishops of Rome in a row. This is one opinion. I mentioned about this. The Lateran Palace was the first significant donation, a gift from Constantine himself to the Bishop of Rome. Other donations followed, mainly in mainland Italy and other provinces, Sicily, etc. But the church held all this land as a private landowner, not as a sovereign entity. When in the 5th century, the Italian peninsula was passed under the control of first Odovaker. He is the invader, and then his descendant, another Ostrogoth. The church organization in Italy and the Pope, as its head, submitted to the sovereign authority while asserting their spiritual primacy over the whole church. The whole church did not accept it easily. I will show you how this acceptance has come to be later on. The most valuable and most extensive possessions were those in Sicily, about Syracuse and Palermo. With these landed possessions scattered and varied as they were, the Pope was the largest landowner in Italy. For this reason, every ruler of Italy was compelled of necessity to reckon with him first of all. But above all, the popes relieved the emperors of the responsibility of providing Rome with food. They supplied the food on behalf of the emperor. And later also assumed the task of warding off the Lombards, that is the invaders, and generally involving financial and military obligations. The Pope thus became the champion of all the oppressed, the political champion of all those who were unwilling to submit to foreign domination, who were unwilling to become Lombards, yet wholly Byzantines, preferring to remain Romans. It was Pope Damasus around 366 to 385. This is after the time of Constantine, with whom they had aligned. The emperor is the supreme pontiff. It is now Pope Damasus who pointed out for the first time that the Church of Rome is no ordinary church, but an apostolic see. See means seat. Apostolic means started by an apostle. In this case, the apostle is Saint Peter, who is the primary apostle, because Jesus has said that here is Peter, he is a rock. Peter means rock. I think it is a Greek word. I will build my church upon him. Therefore, Saint Peter had a primacy over other apostles. So this the Roman church is founded by Saint Peter, and therefore this is a primary church, church. So this started around 366, 385, that period. Pope Leo, a little while later, had gone ahead and drawn the conclusion, namely, just as Saint Peter had primacy over all other apostles, the Bishop of Rome was entitled to primacy over all other bishops. Yeah. So the emperor has supported the religion. Therefore, in exchange, the Christian emperors had allowed and assisted the church to destroy paganism. They aligned with the emperor, so emperor permitted this. Despoil the properties of pagan shrines and usurp the privileges of pagan priesthood. The church was able to augment its wealth, land, and otherwise to a vast extent and get it exempted from all manner of taxation and state scrutiny. The state and the church continue to coexist and function in active cooperation for quite some time. I have mentioned this. I'll skip this file. Papal states began in 6th century. The papal states were territories in the Italian peninsula under the sovereign direct rule of the Pope. From around 500 AD onwards, but it stabilized in 754 AD when Emperor Pepin offered certain lands which he conquered from the Lombards to the Pope. So it got stabilized as as a temporal ruler by around 750 AD and lasted until 1870. They were among the major states of Italy from roughly the 6th century until the Italian peninsula was unified in 1861 by the Kingdom of Sardinia. After 1861, the Papal states reduced to Lazio continued to exist until 1870. This was commonly called the temporal power of the Pope as opposed to its ecclesiastical primacy. This is the title of the Pope finally. Now we'll look at the second chapter here, the Apostolic Throne. In the beginning, the church was simply one among the several centers of Christian activities. Others were, one is in Jerusalem, another was in Antioch. Antioch is in Syria. Alexandria is in Egypt. Constantinople is Byzantium. It is to the south of the Black Sea. Jesus had mentioned about 7 lampstands, not one, but 7. So there were several of these centers had started. The Roman Church gained a boost in prestige when the powerful Roman emperor joined its rank on his deathbed. Pope Leo I, around 440 to 61, claimed that since Saint Peter had established the church in Rome, the Bishop of Rome is entitled for primacy over all other bishops. Subsequent to the attacks by Lombard in 476, they gained papal states. Then, in order to consolidate their position, the Catholic Church indulged in a series of forgeries, consolidating its position, asserting its primacy over other churches, and also legitimizing its political authority over the papal states. Both these things were in the agenda, and it is a long time they took, but they succeeded in both of them. They took to systematic forgery of documents. I have listed 3 categories of documents which we shall discuss now, because it is important to look at these forgeries, as to look at the methods they adopted in the historical perspective to gain legitimacy. The first of them was a letter supposed to have been written by Bishop Clement I. See, this letter was forged sometime in the 4th century. Supposed to have been written in the 1st century. Bishop Clement became a bishop in 88 AD. And the letter says that this letter is supposed to have been written by Clement I to the Bishop of Jerusalem. His name is James. He was the brother of Jesus. So the letter is supposed to contain that Clement I writing to James in Jerusalem, claiming that Peter himself had given charge to him. But Clement became bishop really 21 years after the death of Peter. And James had already died in 68 AD. Peter died in 67 AD. And this gentleman Clement became the bishop in 88 AD. The purpose of this forgery was to establish primacy of Roman Church over other churches, claiming legitimacy from Saint Peter. Another forgery is called the Donation of Constantine. This document, there is an elaborate support to this document. It is not a single piece of paper. There are paintings and there are several other artifacts which are accompanying this donation. This donation is supposed to be donation from Emperor Constantine to Pope Sylvester I. What is the donation? Donation is the western part of his own kingdom was surrendered to Pope Sylvester, and the year of surrendering is said to be either 315 or 317. In fact, it is not quoted as 315 or 17, but they quoted two incidents. The document quotes two incidents occurring in the same year, but actually they occurred in two different years. 300, that's how it came to be known. The people had suspicion that this is a forgery. Surrendered the half of the kingdom, western part of the Roman Empire, to the papacy. This is the claim of that document. And this document was created sometime in 754 AD. That is about 400 years plus after the supposed date of donation. And it was used time and again, but it was also used until 1150 AD that we are legitimate rulers. Otherwise, church was, the mandate for the church was actually religious conversion, not ruling the world. But papacy claimed that they are legitimate rulers because Emperor Constantine has given us the land for rule as sovereigns. This was exposed clearly and unambiguously in the year 1440 AD by an Italian priest by name Lorenzo Valla. The third is not one document, it is a set of documents. It may be something like more than 300 documents. They are known as pseudo-Isidorian decretals. Decretal means decrees. Decrees means letters with authority under the seal. So they are letters written, purported to have been written by the popes from Rome to others. And there are replies also. All of them are forgeries. More than 300 documents. This is kept in the archives of Rome and was used for political purposes. To have been written by popes in the first 3 centuries. Used by Pope Gregory VII in between 1073 to 85 to assert the primacy of Rome over the universal church. The content of this letter is to establish the primacy of Rome over other churches. So Pope Leo had gone ahead and drawn the conclusion, namely that Saint Peter's primacy over other apostles. The Bishop of Rome was entitled to primacy over other bishops. A passage from the Gospel. On what basis did he claim? There is a Gospel of Matthew. There is a reference to that, saying that Saint Peter is an exclusive power to bind and to loose, bind and loose on earth as well as in heaven. This is supposed to be Jesus' statement. The power is conferred on Saint Peter and we are inheriting that lineage. The second was a letter from Clement I. I've already mentioned that. But Clement I assumed power only in 88, whereas both Saint Peter and James had died by 68 AD. I've said this. It has been suggested that an early draft of donation of Constantine was made shortly after the middle of the 8th century. In order to assist Pope Stephen in his negotiations with Pepin the Short, the French mayor of the palace, who became a ruler. He was a small-time mayor, but Pope Stephen helped him to coronate as a king. In 754, Pope Stephen crossed the Alps to anoint Pepin as king, thereby enabling the Carolingian family to supplant the old royal line. In return for Stephen's support, Pepin gave the Pope the lands in Italy which the Lombards had taken from Byzantine Empire. These lands would become the Papal States. What may perhaps be the earliest known allusion to the donation is a letter of 778 AD, in which Pope Hadrian exhorted to Chamberlain, whose father Pepin the Short had initiated the sovereignty of the popes over the Papal States. Your father has given us land, you too give. That is the exhortation from the Pope to the son of Pepin. So based on this document, that the donation of Constantine was a decree of Roman Emperor Constantine dated 30th March in a year mistakenly said to be both that of his fourth consulate and that of a consulate of Gallicanus, contains a detailed profession of Christian faith and a recounting of how the emperor, seeking a cure of his leprosy, was converted and baptized by Pope Sylvester I. The reality is that he got converted, he got baptized 20 years later, 337. In gratitude, he determined to bestow, that is Constantine determined to bestow on the See of Peter power and dignity of glory and vigor and honor imperial and supremacy as well over the four principal sees, that is Alexandria, Antioch, Jerusalem and Constantinople, as also over all the churches of God in the whole earth. For the upkeep of the church of Saint Peter and that of Saint Paul, he gave landed estates in Judea, Greece, Asia, Thrace, Africa, Italy and various islands. To Sylvester and his successors, he also granted the imperial insignia. And the city of Rome and all the provinces, places and cities of Italy and the western regions. This is the donation of Constantine. In support of that, they have created this painting. This is where, this is Constantine bending before Sylvester. Close up. So he is offering his half the kingdom to the Pope in return to the cure that he obtained from the Pope, from the grace of the Pope, to his leprosy. This was exploded by a priest of Roman Catholic Church only in Italy by name Lorenzo Valla. Valla's originality, critical acumen and knowledge of classical Latin style were put to good use in an essay he wrote between 1939 and 40. In this, he demonstrated that the document known as the donation of Constantine could not possibly have been written in the historical era of Constantine I in the 4th century, as its vernacular style dated conclusively to a later era. One of Valla's reasons was that the document contained the word satra, which he believed Romans such as Constantine would not have used. There are many such philological discrepancies. The donation continued to be tacitly accepted as authentic until Caesar Baronius, in his Annals of Ecclesiastic, published somewhere in 1600, admitted that it was a forgery, after which it was almost universally accepted as such. Today, nobody claims this document as original or valid. It is a forgery. But it has been under use for more than 7 centuries, or yeah, about 7 centuries. And it was accepted as bona fide. That gave legitimacy for papal power. Then another set is the pseudo Isidorian decretals written around 845 AD. The decretals are a complete fabrication of church history. They set forth precedents for the exercise of sovereign authority of the popes over the universal church prior to the 4th century and made it appear that the popes had always exercised sovereign dominion and had ultimate authority even over church councils. Nicholas I in 858 was the first to use them as the basis for advancing his claims of authority over the universal church. But it was not until the 11th century with Pope Gregory VII that these decretals were used in a significant way to alter the government of the Western Church into a system of church law which elevated Gregory and his successors as absolute monarchs over the Church of the West. Thus, the Bishop of Rome, now called the Pope, was hoisted as a supreme pontiff of the Church in retrospect using Isidorian decretals. There are more, I will not go into that. Just quote one statement. It's a book from William Webster. He says, these decretal epistles means letters, had undisputed authority for some 700 years. That is to say, down to the time of the Reformation. If we want to know what share these letters had in the building of the Roman fabric, we have only to look at the canon law. Canon law is the church law which they observe. The Decretum of Gracia quotes 324 times the epistles of the popes of the first 4 centuries. And of these 324 quotations, 313 are from the letters which are now universally known to be spurious. So forgery as foundation of the apostolic throne. It was Voltaire who called this as the boldest and the most magnificent forgery that ever deceived the world. We look at the temporal rulers, how they consolidated their power. The church is called the mystical body of Christ. It is also called the bride of Christ. It was founded with a mandate to baptize the mankind, but eventually the church found it expedient to enter the economic and political arena, initially as landowners and later as sovereign rulers of the papal states. The popes ruled as any other despotic ruler in Europe, matching them in pomp, atrocities, cruelty, and debauchery, causing violence and death to their perceived enemies. I have said the popes ruled as any other despotic ruler in Europe. It is an understatement. They ruled much worse. And I'll show you how they ruled. But it is certainly not less cruel than any other despotic ruler. While the secular kings, not only despotic, not only cruel, but also immoral. While the secular kings wielded one sword to ward off challenges to their power, the church wielded two swords. By now, the church is become synonymous, or the papacy has become synonymous with the church. Church means the Roman church, Roman Catholic Church. Wielded two swords. One, they called it as the temporal sword. The other, they called it as the spiritual sword, claiming divine authority over both the domains. By around 1200 AD, the Apostolic See of Rome was the most powerful seat of secular power, wielding enormous influence over the entire Europe. It took several centuries, but they had set their eyes, very clear goals, and they achieved it. By around 1500 AD, the Pope was assuming sovereignty over the whole world. Assuming because they are really not sovereigns, but they said the whole earth is given to us. See, this is where I see the paradigm entering. Whole earth is given to us, they said. To Christianity, but Christianity means the Roman Catholic Church, which is the papacy. And then they said, okay, they took the globe. By then the globes had become fashion. And they took the globe and then drew a line, or probably not the globe, maybe the map. They drew a line from Arctic to Antarctic, divided the earth into two parts. And one part, the Pope gave it to the Spanish. The other part, they gave it to the Portuguese. And said that you go and fly your flag in these areas. Don't fight with each other. I am giving you the earth divided into two. Go. Now, this is from the Catholic historian, Archbishop of New York, Cardinal Farley. He's apologetic about the fact that the temporal rulers had to resort to violence, but always in the service of truth, he claims. The popes were temporal rulers of the civil territory, and they naturally had recourse to force the re-establishment or extend the states of the church until the conclusion of peace was confirmed. Until peace is established, they enforced force, and they used force. Their attempts to purify, particularly the Duchy of Rome, this is where the papal state began, the Duchy of Rome, caused them considerable distress and the need to resort to violence, but always on the side of mercy. Lives were lost in the service of truth. But the legal basis of the Christian church to hold and transmit properties for the benefit of revenues was given to them by Emperor Constantine in 312. So it was not illegitimate. It is legitimate only. So unfortunately, they had to resort to violence. At the Fourth Lateran Council on April 1215, Innocent III, the Pope Innocent III, demanded that the Jews wear distinctive dress. He also declared that anybody caught reading the Bible would be stoned to death. Because in those days, the Bible was only in Latin, and it is only after the Reformation that the Bible was translated into German, English, etc. And reading the Bible was punishable offense. Bible would be stoned to death. Reading the Bible would be stoned to death by the soldiers of the church militia. But the main purpose of his council was to develop a plan to extend his military affairs, his intention being ultimately to dominate all Europe, in which he intended to subject all kings and princes to the judgment of the Holy See. So it is same Pope, Innocent III. He is considered to be one of the very powerful, and he called Innocent the Great, powerful popes. On the occasion of his coronation, his speech on the occasion of his coronation, it's called the sermon. He said, he laid out his policy and the basis of his rule. Now you may see who is the servant who is placed over the family of the Lord, that is church. Family of the Lord is the church. Truly, that is the Pope, is he the vicar of Jesus Christ. He is the earthly representative of Jesus, the successor of Saint Peter, the Christ of the Lord, placed in the middle between God and man, on the side of God, but beyond man, less than God, but greater than man, who judges all, but is judged by none. He said, there is no power above me. When he was reminded that the Pope was only a successor to Saint Peter, he said, he clarified, we are successors to the Prince of Apostles, Saint Peter. Yes, but we are not his vicar. We are not his representative. We are equal to him now. Nor vicar of any man or apostle, but vicar of Jesus Christ himself. We represent the Lord, but not Saint Peter, he says. See how he behaved. Innocent had inherited a quarrel with King Philip II, Augustus of France, who had prevailed upon his bishops to grant him a divorce from Queen Ingeborg in 1194. At that time, these kings had already come under the influence of church, and they had to take permission to marry as well as to divorce. He had married a lady, now he wanted to divorce him and marry someone else. So he asked permission from the Pope, Philip II Augustus of France. But the Pope Celestine, had refused to confirm the divorce. But Philip II had ignored the Pope and married his mistress Agnes in 1196. As soon as Innocent got installed, he commanded the king to dismiss and take back Ingeborg. The king remained adamant and threatened to embrace Islam if he was pressed further. The Pope placed France under an interdict. Interdict means a prohibition. An authoritative prohibition is called interdict. When the emissaries of the king arrived in Rome in 1202, that is 4 years after, seeking a settlement, acquainted them with his unlimited powers. Said the Pope, single rulers, single provinces, and single kings have single kingdoms. But the Pope, as in the plenitude, so in the extent of his power, is preeminent over all, since he is the vicar of him whose is this earth and the fullness thereof, the whole world and all that dwells therein. All that dwell therein. In 1243, Sincibaldo Pesci, a native of Genoa, assumed the papal chair and the slaughters continued unabated. He called himself Innocent IV, and he surpassed all his predecessors in the ferocity and unscrupulousness of his attacks. After the completion of the annihilation of Cathars, I'll tell you more about these Cathars. After the completion of annihilation of the Cathars, who is a different sect, a sect which is Christian only, but is different from the Catholic sect. He turned the military attention of the church onto the family of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. Frederick was one of those European rulers who was considered to be a very good ruler. He was fondly known as the wonder of the world, and he was the last great ruler of the Hohenstaufen dynasty. His family opposed the Catholic army, and Frederick and later his son, Conrad, spent their lives locked up in fierce battles with papal troops. Laymen was hostile to papacy. This is considered to be one of the very important papal bulls. Important in the sense very notable papal bulls. Early in his 7-year papacy in 1296, Pope Boniface, another very important name in the history of papacy, issued the first of two of the most famous bulls in Christian history. Its tone recalled the papal thunderbolts of Gregory VII. And its opening words, Clerics Laico, gave it a name. Its first sentence made a truthful admission that and reveals the moral ugliness within Christianity. Antiquity reports that laymen are exceedingly hostile to the papacy, and our experience certainly shows this to be true at present. See, this papal bull, Clerics Laicos, it states it excommunicates all members of the clergy who, without authorization from the Holy See, pay to laymen any part of their income or the revenue of the church, and all rulers who receive such payments. Thomas Aquinas was a theologian, considered to be a very great theologian, had laid down his doctrine of the two swords. Says Thomas Aquinas, he wrote, "The highest aim of mankind is eternal happiness. To this chief aim of mankind, all earthly aims must be subordinated. This chief aim cannot be realized through human direction alone, but must obtain divine assistance, which is only to be obtained through the church. Therefore, the state through which earthly aims are obtained must be subordinated to the church. Church and the state are as two swords which God has given to Christendom for protection. Both of these are, however, given by him to the Pope, and the temporal sword handed by him, that is Pope, to the rulers of the state." Very clear theological enunciation of the supremacy of Pope over temporal rulers. Pope Innocent IV, calling a church council at Lyons in France in 1245, proclaimed, "The popes have received sovereignty not only in heaven but on earth. Outside the church there is no building save hell, and exists no power obtained by God. Secular rulers exercising their authority are only using a power which has been transferred to them and which remains latent and potential in the bosom of the church. Now, there is a feud between Philip IV of France and Pope Boniface VIII. In a letter written to Philip, claimed divinity, the Pope claimed divinity or divine authority over kings. He said, God has set popes over kings and kingdoms. And the same Boniface VIII, in his bull of 1302, proclaimed that it is absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman pontiff, pushing papal supremacy to its historical extreme. All mankind, all kings are subject to the authority of the Pope given to them by God. Pope Boniface VIII issued the Bull of Two Swords, Unum Sanctum, which means the one holy. There is only one which is holy, which formalized the framework of Christianity's core structure for centuries to come. The Pope's bulletin declared that the church controlled two swords, is two powers. He said, or the bulletin says, both swords are in the power of the church, the spiritual and the temporal. The spiritual is wielded in the church by the head of the clergy. The secular is exerted for the church by the hands of its military. And the spiritual power has the right to establish and guide the secular power and also judge it when it does not act rightly. Consequently, whoever opposes the two swords of the church opposes the law of God. The Vicar of the Christ, according to Christian theology, is the highest manifestation of the Holy Spirit in the terrestrial sphere till the second coming of the only Savior. Jesus is to manifest again, that is called the second coming of Christ or Jesus. But until then, the Pope is supreme over humanity. He is supposed to be the manifestation of the Holy Spirit, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So he is the Holy Spirit. Soon after the Pope put on that plumage, Bishop Alvarez Pelayo has proclaimed the Pope is not simply a man, but rather a God on earth. This is year 1335. See, after around 1150, the papal power was on the ascendancy. By this time, it had risen to the supreme level all over Europe. It remained so until Reformation started in 1500 plus, 1517. Pope Alexander VI, this is another pope, noteworthy pope. I think his name is Borgio. Pretended to be the king of the whole world and divided the earth between Portugal and Spain by drawing a line across the globe. Portugal and Spain were not in need of the Pope's sanction for claiming what their sailors had sighted and what their pirates were preparing to grab by the strength of the sword. But the Vicar of Jesus Christ could not permit human history to proceed without putting his own stamp on every event. He had to pontificate on his bulls on the kings of Portugal and Spain that we in our own motion and by the fullness of apostolic powers, do give, grant, and assign to you, your heirs and successors, all the firm lands and islands found or to be found, discovered or to be discovered, drawing a line from the pole Arctic to the pole Antarctic, from the north to the south. Pope Paul IV issued the following bull: since the reason of the apostolate to us, since by reason of the apostolate to us, divinely entrusted, the general care of the flock of the Lord devolves on us, the Roman Pontiff, who is the vice regent of God, the Lord Jesus Christ, upon earth, having plenitude of powers over nations and kingdoms, judging all and being judged by none. We decree that all persons whatsoever, be they counts, barons, marquises, dukes, kings, and emperors, who hitherto shall be found deviating from faith, shall ipso facto, without any process of law or proof of fact, be deprived of dignities as the counts, barons, marquises, dukes, kings, and emperors, altogether and absolutely, and shall be in future held to be disqualified. This is exercising absolute power over the entire humanity. They claim that they have the power to pluck, destroy, dissipate, and ruin. It was the vicar of Jesus Christ in the form of Pope Pius V, turned his formidable face towards Queen Elizabeth of England in 1570. He wrote to the Queen, "He that reigneth on the high, that is Jesus Christ, to whom is given all the power in heaven and earth, has committed the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, out of which there is no salvation. Outside which there is no salvation. To one alone, namely to Peter, Prince of Apostles, and the Roman Pontiff, successor of Peter, to be governed with a plenitude of power. This one he hath constituted prince over all nations and all kingdoms, that he might pluck up, destroy, dissipate, ruin, plant, and build." Absolute power. However, this power came to an end in 1870. The Italian patriot bayonets finally recovered the stolen regions and restored them to a united Italy. At that time, the Italians under Victor Emmanuel II, King of Sardinia, took back Rome and the adjacent papal territories and declared the eternal city, that is Rome, the capital of the newly formed United Kingdom of Italy. The papal states, with 15,774 square miles and 3 million tax-paying inhabitants, were thus removed from the Vatican's investment portfolio and vanished forever from the map of Europe and from history. The church, with the exception of 108 acres of the Vatican City, no longer had any ill-gained earthly European dominion to rule, and its temporal sovereignty came to an end. According to World Christian Encyclopedia, the state of Vatican City covers no more than 108 acres. Today, what you call as the Vatican State, of which the Pope is the ruler. Its extent is only 108 acres. Every villa with a patio, a terrace, a tennis court, a kennel, a lawn, a swimming pool, some servant quarters enclosed within high walls. The city can be called a state only in the sense of a sprawling head office, staff, transport, communications, broadcasting, and TV facilities of a corporate company. Now we'll look at the fourth chapter, the Crusades. Crusades are religious wars conducted by Catholic Europe, which means papacy, against Muslims, pagans, and heretics. This is the dividing line. So they cross the line and conduct wars. They are known as crusades. But specifically, the name crusade has come from, is of French origin, meaning taking up the cross, the Christian cross. They will fight under the cross, not under a king per se. There is no unified king who does this, but they are not united under a single king, but united under the cross. There were in all about 19 crusades over an interval of something like 475 years, of which 9 crusades were against the Muslims to recover the holy land of Jerusalem from their grip. Others were against pagans and heretics. The total death toll of these crusades runs into 3 million over a period of 475 years. First, the Holy Land part, the crusade against Muslims. Palestine is considered to be a holy land by all the 3 Semitic religions, the Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Jerusalem is holy because it is the promised land for the Jews. Moses led them across the Mediterranean Sea from Egypt to the promised land, and that promised land is Palestine. And for the Christians, because Jesus was crucified there. And for the Muslims, because an event in Muslim theology, Prophet Muhammad had a visitor one day by name Gabriel, a heavenly being, who took him over a horse. He asked him to ride a horse. It was not actually a horse. It was supposed to be something in between the mule and a donkey. The horse's name is Barak. He asked him to mount the Barak and took him from there in 1 second from Mecca to Jerusalem. And from Jerusalem, he took him to the heavens. And along with Gabriel, Prophet Muhammad is said to have visited the 7 heavens. And there is a list of whom he met in which heaven, etc. So this event is known as Isra and Miraj event. So since Muhammad first landed from Mecca, he landed on Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem he went to heaven, sitting over this horse, Barak. So it is considered to be holy by the Muslims also. There is a mosque called Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, and it is considered as the 3rd holiest place for Muslims after Mecca and Medina. The Holy Land was under the control of Christian Byzantine Empire. Byzantine is Constantinople, where the Christians were ruling. They were not the Roman Catholics now, but they were Greek Orthodox Catholics. It was under the control of Christian Byzantine Empire, from whom the Arab Muslims had wrested it, which was then taken by the Turks. So it was under the Turks now, And Pope Urban in 1096 gave a call for a crusade. This is the first crusade. For the Christians to take up the cross and fight for gaining access to the holy places in Jerusalem. And Pope knew that no single king can accomplish this task. So he gave a call under the cross, and several lakhs of people were mobilized. They became the militia, and they had taken oath of liberating the Holy Land from the grip of the Turks. And in return, the Pope granted them indulgences. Indulgence means the sin is excused, the forgiving of the sin. So normally indulgences are exchanged for money. You have to pay money to the cross and purchase this so much of punya. So it is said that Jesus has all the punyam in the world, infinite amount of punyam, because he died on the cross, and from that stock the papacy would distribute it to people who believe on payment. This is called indulgence. So in this case, Pope Urban granted them indulgences without actual payments, but in return to their commitment to fight in the Crusades wars. Sanctioned the first 8 church crusades that extended in time to a total of 19. And they continued unabated for 475 years. Heresy, said the church, was a blow in the face of God, and it was the duty of every Christian to kill heretics. Note the parallel between Islam and Christianity. It was a duty of every Christian to kill heretics. Earlier still, Pope Gregory VII officially declared that the killing of heretics is not murder, and decreed it, made it legal for the church and its militants to kill non-believers in Christian dogma. Up until the 19th century, popes compelled Christian monarchs to make heresy a crime punishable by death under their civil codes. But it was not heresy that instigated the crusade against the Cathars. Its purpose was to yield the papacy additional land and revenues, and the popes engaged in brutalities, threats, and all kinds of stratagems to attain their ends. The first crusade, the second crusade, first crusade was a success because they took Palestine, that is Jerusalem, from the grip of, they liberated it from the grip of Muslims. But soon it changed hands again. So then they declared a second crusade. It was not successful. Third crusade was not successful. The fourth crusade was totally unsuccessful in the sense the crusading army left Europe and moved towards Jerusalem. Their strategy was to attack, conquer Egypt, and then claim this land, Holy Land, for themselves. But on the way, the crusading army went berserk. It attacked the city of Zara and ransacked it. The Zara city was under the Catholics. So the moment Pope heard of that, he placed the entire crusading army, he excommunicated them. But then the army proceeded further. On the way to Jerusalem was the Byzantium, that is Constantinople. They had some agreement, some politics with the prince of Constantinople, whose father was the king, but then was deposed by somebody. So the prince approached this invading army, or rather this crusading army, and sought help. They went into the city and reinstalled the emperor. But then soon the emperor was killed, and the promised money by the prince was not coming forth because the power has changed hands. So they decided to sack the city. So they sacked the city, looted, and then they did not go to Jerusalem. They returned to Europe. So this is the Fourth Crusade. In fact, Pope John Paul II, who was the Pope between 1978 to 2005, that is the turn of the 20th century, he made an apology to this, saying that I'm really sorry that the Christian army had attacked the Christian city and ransacked it. The fifth, so that is the Fourth Crusade. The Fifth Crusade also was a failure. Sixth had a kind of a diplomatic victory, because when the Sixth Crusading army reached Jerusalem, the other side came in for a truce, and they conceded passage for Christians to Jerusalem, and the army, crusading army, returned. 7th, 8th, 9th crusades were failures. So 9 crusades against Muslims. Yeah, the crusaders were Christians from all over Western Europe under feudal rather than unified command. By feudal, we mean that there were several knights who were commanding it. It was not a one king commanding it. There were 7 major crusades against Muslim territories in the east and numerous minor ones. Politics were often complicated, and intra-faith competition also led to alliances between faiths against their co-religionist opponents, such as the Christian alliance with the Islamic Sultanate of Rome during the Fifth Crusade. Pope apologized in 2001 after 800 years of this crusade, when while visiting with the Archbishop of Athens, the primate of Greece, the Pope gave a speech in which he said, "Some memories are especially painful, and some events of the distant past have left deep wounds in the minds and hearts of people to this day. I am thinking of the disastrous sack of the imperial city of Constantinople, which was for so long the bastion of Christianity in the East. It is tragic that the assailants, who had set out to secure free access for Christians to the Holy Land, turned against their own brothers in the faith. The fact that they were fills Catholics with deep regret. How can we not share, at a distance of 8 centuries, the pain and disgust? Please note this apology. Apology is good. It is trying to rectify an error. But my point is that Pope apologized to this crusade, but what about the other crusades? Large amount of life was lost. You will see what happened to the Cathars, who were not Christians, or rather who were Christians but not belonging to the same sect as the Roman Catholics. Here, the Pope apologized to a brothers in faith, Roman Catholics and the Greek Orthodox Catholics. That is all the difference was, and he apologized for that. But it did not happen for others. So the dividing line is very thin. While I would say that it was very considerate of him to apologize, to try to heal a wound. That is fine. But always the paradigm is operative. In 1182, Pope Lucius gained control of the official apparatus of the church and in heretics and authorized a crusade against the heretics. It was authorized by a papal bull declaring the Cathars heretics and authorized a crusade against them in 1184. It took a few years before this was implemented, but the declaration was done in 1184. What is Catharism? Catharism was a Christian dualist movement that sought to achieve spiritual purity, thrived in northern Italy and northern Spain and southern France. From between the 12th and 14th centuries. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, for instance, although opposed to the Cathars, he is a saint, he belongs to the church, said of them in a sermon 65 on the Song of Songs, he says, if you question the heretic about his faith, that is referring to the Cathars, referring to his faith, nothing is more Christian. If about his daily converse, nothing more blameless. And what he says, he proves by his actions. As regards his life and conduct, he cheats no one, pushes ahead of no one, does violence to no one. Moreover, his cheeks are pale with fasting. He does not eat the bread of idleness. He labors with his hands and thus makes his living. This is a description of Cathars in France. And see what happened. Pope Celestine supported the earlier decision of Pope Lucius to annihilate every Cathar from the face of the earth. What is the fault? They differed from the traditional Christianity and pursued their own, wanted to be more pure. So they were leading a pious life. To do this, now early on the 13th century, Pope Innocent III, one of the greatest popes of the Middle Ages, according to Catholic Encyclopedia, ordered to develop a troop of merciless followers called the Catholic Army of 200,000 foot troops and 20,000 mail-clad horse-mounted knights. The general populace labeled them as throat cutters, but Dominic deemed them the militia of Jesus Christ. And he later increased the army to an additional 1,000 troops. The Catholic writer Bishop Delany, said that the church's fighting force developed into 5 lakh troops against a body of ordinary, unarmed folk of Cathars. The crusade against the Cathars began on the 22nd July 1209, and it was a ruthless demonstration of the church militant. Arnauld Amaury, the Abbé of Cîteaux, commanded troops bearing a banner with a green cross and a sword. When the army was activated, it was directed and manipulated unequivocally under the control of the Church of Christ. With the instructions of Abbé, the church undertook one of the most gruesome massacres of human beings in world history. What followed was horrific. The crusade started at Béziers, and some chroniclers say that all inhabitants of the city were massacred within 1 week. Some put the number of the dead at 40,000 men and women and children. It is said that during the first few days, 6,000 or 7,000 people were systematically taken to the church of Saint Magdalene and individually slaughtered. It's a great pity that we have no reliable records of the population of Béziers. One can only point out that it was one of the great cities of the prosperous and for these days highly populated Languedoc. What stands out with certainty about the massacre on the 22nd July 1209 is its appalling extent and its indiscriminate nature. But there was worse to come. The Crusader army under the command, both spiritually and militarily, the Abbe Arnaud Amaury was commanding it, the papal legate, the abbot of Cîteaux. In the first significant engagement of the war, the town of Béziers was besieged on the 22nd July. The Catholic inhabitants of the city were granted the freedom to leave unharmed, but many refused and opted to stay and fight alongside the Cathars. The Cathars spent much of 1209 fending off the Crusaders. The first week there was an onslaught, but then it extended until the whole population was eliminated. Arnaud Amaury, the abbot commander, is supposed to have been asked how to tell Cathars from the Catholics. Because there were Cathars, also Catholics living side by side. How to separate them? You need to kill only the Cathars. How to do that? Then his reply, recalled by Caesar, a fellow Cistercian, 30 years later, he recalled, was that kill all of them, kill them all. The Lord will recognize his soul. Who is a Catholic, who is a Cathar, you don't have to distinguish, kill all of them. The Lord will find who is a Catholic and send him to heaven, other to the hell. That was the reply. Now, this annihilation of the Cathars continued for a few years until all of them were finished. That is about the Crusades, the nature of Crusades, the dividing line. And I will take up the Dark Age in the next session. Right now, I'll stop here. If there are any questions, please.
Okay, so namaste. Anybody having questions? Yes, Abhijit Tandurji, please, sir.
Hello, namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Sir, I wanted to ask one question, which was, why has Islam succeeded in using the phrase death to kafirs for waging jihad for political goals in the contemporary world, whereas Christianity hasn't been that successful? Is it because differences in the culture with respect to West and the Middle East?
Do I understand the question correctly? You said why the Muslims use jihad successfully for political reasons, political gain.
Yes, sir. In comparison to the Christians.
No, Christians also used this dividing line between the heretics and other things are political and economic purposes. They succeeded. There is no difference in their paradigm. They can use it for any purpose. They did use it for any purpose. Conversion is the ultimate thing. If you are not able to convert, then kill them. You don't see it now here because the Christianity has changed its tactics.
Okay.
After the Reformation, after 1500, Reformation started within the church. There was, which we will take up with a little more detail in the next session. Once the Reformation started, Reformation had considerable success because people were fed up with this church. So people started flocking to Protestantism. And also, Renaissance started in Europe. The scientific revolution started in Europe. And the nations refused to obey the papacy. They started revolting. Because of all this, the power of papacy started declining. When they declined, the old methods do not work. When they realized that the old methods don't work, they changed their tactics. They said, we shall now enter the social service field. This is a conscious decision. Instead of using the sword, instead of using other means of conversion, coercion, they said that we will go to the social service domain. In the social service domain, they said, we have to endear ourselves to the people. In order to endear, the best opportunity or best path is actually to start schools and hospitals.
Okay, sir. Sir, can we assume that that's the reason why Christianity is being accepted as a comparatively a more peaceful religion than Islam because it underwent reformation and Islam failed to?
Yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any question?
Okay, one more time. Anybody? Question? Okay, so we will end this week's talk here, and we can meet again next week. Sir, we'll end it with Shanti Mantra. Sir. Rajaram, do you have a question? Okay.
No, Hari.
Okay, fine then. Okay, sir.
Yeah. Shanti mantra.
Yes, sir.
Om Sarve bhavantu sukhina. Sarve
Ramaya. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu. Ma kaschit bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.